Hi, and welcome to the podcast for Reading for Narrative. We had quite a discussion in class about narrative and reviewed kind of the first person, second person, and third person, the Aristotelian and Platonic, and we also explored some of the more modern senses of narrative by looking at what Eliot says about voice. One of the things I do want to mention to you is that you should always kind of be a little bit cagey or a little bit aware of a narrator when you see the word I, because first person normally means that this is going to be a narrative written from one person's point of view, which could mean that they are deluded or mistaken or uninformed about other aspects of the story. We also spent some time talking about stream of consciousness and, of course, a little bit about free and indirect discourse. Um, One of the other things I want to introduce to you is the notion of defamiliarization. This goes to the Russian critic Viktor Shlotsky, who suggests that with defamiliarization, things are made strange, and in the narrative, the familiar and ordinary is turned into something strange and wondrous. This magic, according to Shlotsky, is what literature does for us. It makes us re examine what we thought we knew. And you can kind of see this happening. And we are going to talk a little bit about Shlotsky and defamiliarization. One of the reasons we want to think about, of course, narrative and narrative kind of faults is that within narratives, there are stories about characters who just don't get it. There are stories about people who are hiding something, stories about several people with competing versions of the same events. Do we see this in Babylon Revisited? Stories about people who are picking up the pieces. Stories about the multiplicity of reality or where reality is up for grabs. And stories about really, really bad people. And of course, the odd monster. Um, when we think about narration, we always need to think about what's going on and how is it happening and how is it being told. Um, narrators are expressed, point of view is expressed by word choice, of course, and word order, but there's often a sense that point of view in a narration kind of opens up the door to many different things and many different aspects, and it's how we get to know the story. And of course, we always need to think about the age of the narrator, education. I mean, think about William Faulkner. You know, he uses these multiple viewpoints for the narration that really do create the story as much as the characters or the action in there. Um, we need to think about the meaning that is conveyed through voice. What a narrator says and how he or she says it changes the story being told and read. Think about your favorite book. Now think about it being told by not by the narrator that tells it, but by one of the characters in the story. This is a trick of adaptation, but it really does. If you think about that and mull it over a little bit, you see why the point of view matters so much. Here's a little handout that we are going to go over in class. And it's the difference between describing story and describing plot structure, because we're going to try to divide those. To describe story in a film, and this of course is a film, but we're going to apply it to literature, these are some of the questions. Where is the story set? What event starts the story? Who are the main characters? What conflicts do they face, and what is at stake? What happens to the characters as they face this conflict, and what is the outcome of this conflict and the ultimate impact on the characters? So that's story. Now, when we're thinking about plot, let's think, how and when is the major conflict in the story set up? How and when are the main characters introduced? How is the story moved along so that the characters must face the central conflict? And how and when is the major conflict set up to propel the piece of literature to its conclusion? And how and when does the piece of literature resolve most of the major conflicts set up at the outset? So remember, narrative is plot and story, and it works together to construct a meaning, to construct an understanding, and also really to think about kind of the expectations that are met or unmet by what we are reading. Um, there's a great book written by Peter Brooks called Reading for Plot, which really does talk a lot about narrative. I would highly recommend it. If you do have any questions or concerns following this podcast, please feel free to get in touch with me. Thank you very much and have a good day.